So we're learning now that the FBI is reopening 3 critical cases that were sort of swept under the rug. Not a whole lot of transparency. We were just told, hey, nothing to see here. Move along, move along. Well, no, actually, these cases should be pretty easy to solve. And if it's true that there wasn't a crime there, well, the FBI or the Justice Department could be fully transparent and forthcoming to show us exactly what they learned to reach that conclusion. So, what are these crimes? Let's turn to my friend and colleague, Guy Benson, earlier on Fox Business. He lays it all out.
Do you have confidence in Patel and Bongino that they will depoliticize the FBI?
I very much hope that they will. I think this is a good step, what you just outlined. Those 3 cases have different levels of significance in my mind. The top priority has to be the bombs. Bombs placed outside the RNC and the DNC right before a very violent day in our nation's capital. The fact that that remains unsolved is quite disturbing, and they should not be taking a second look at it. They should have never stopped looking at it. They need to find whoever's responsible for that. The Supreme Court leak tears at the fabric of our system. That was unprecedented. It was clearly political. It did result in threats and a diminishment in faith in that institution, which has now gone back up, thankfully, but that needs to be resolved as well. Then the cocaine at the White House, I think we all have our theories about what happened there. Some people might expect that it had something to do with a certain former president's family member. But to me, less important than that is, was there an effort internally to squelch the investigation for political reasons to protect the Biden family? That would be the real problem, and that's what we need to know.
That's right. My friend Guy is right up there against the final shoe that needs to drop here in the investigation of these 3 crimes. That's the 4th crime, potentially. We'll get to it in a moment, but on this topic, last night I was on Newsmax, the Right Squad, with my friends Chris Plante and Mercedes Schlapp, and we talked about this issue, and I want to share our conversation with you.
This does nothing good for the morale of individual agents. They've got cases to work on. They're already under attack by this administration. Those of them who worked on January 6th related cases that were assigned to them have legitimate fears about their future. And so now to see cases being reopened that have already been disposed of, that I think is concerning to the rank and file.
Tonight's red hot video, that's MS-13 NBC legal analyst Joyce Vance, if that's her real name. She doesn't like the fact that FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino has announced that the FBI is reopening investigations into cases like the White House cocaine. Remember that? The packet of cocaine there at the White House. Who could have left that there if only we had cameras? The January 6th pipe bombs. Those, one at DNC headquarters, one at RNC headquarters. Hey, here he is on video on his telephone. We can't find him. And, of course, the leak out of the Supreme Court on the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, which the Democrats love so much. Truly extraordinary stuff. And I've got to say, it's about time these things open. I know they've only had a couple of months themselves in the new administration, but the fact that all those just dropped and you can't find out who leaked the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court, I'd go find her in a day. Look at Sonia Sotomayor's office, went to an Ivy League school, parents are big Democrat donors, narrow it down to about 2 of them. I'll find her by close of business tomorrow. But amazing stuff, and it's about time the FBI reopened these.
Yes, to focus on that Dobbs leak specifically, Justice Samuel Alito said that this absolutely destroyed trust amongst colleagues in the Supreme Court, that people felt like they had to hide things from each other. He said that he thought he knew who did it, couldn't prove it, so they weren't able to release that information. But this was a big deal. An extremist pro-abortion group called Ruth Sent Us doxed the conservative justices after this leak, leading to weeks of protest at their house, death threats, firebombing on pro-life pregnancy centers, on churches, and all sorts of very serious issues. There was an assassination attempt on Justice Kavanaugh. This leak is really a big deal, and it's ridiculous. So many years have passed, and we don't know who's responsible.
Right, and Larry, this is something we should have found out like that.
Of course, easy stuff, and I'm glad that Joyce Vance is concerned about the rank and file and the morale at the FBI, but what undermined them was not the leadership of the last 110 days. What undermined them was the politicized leadership of the last several years. The American people deserve a right to know simple questions to these crimes, and that's what undermines not just the rank and file, but the American people's sense of justice at the federal level, and that's incredibly deteriorating.
Yeah, I mean, and it has been. It's been a tragic 5-year period for the United States of America in so many ways.
That's right. Good work on Newsmax, Larry and Chris and Elizabeth. Because the point that I was making there, which is an important one, is that if you worry about a sense of justice in our society, if you worry about the relationship between our government and the people, then when you see the Justice Department and the FBI used in such a politicized way, well, it actually corrodes that trust that we have with them. And the most shocking thing about the entire episode right now, that the FBI is reopening these investigations to either determine exactly what went on and whether they can actually solve the crime, who dropped the pipe bomb, who left the cocaine, and who leaked the Dobbs decision. If they can't solve it, at least share with the American people what evidence you did find to reach the conclusion that the case can't be solved. But instead, we had people that we don't trust stand in front of us and say, don't worry, we can't solve it, but there's nothing to see here. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. No, I don't think so. You know why I think this is a good idea? Well, part of the secret was in that Newsmax clip just now where you saw an MSNBC legal analyst decrying the fact that these investigations are going to continue. You heard what she said. Very interesting language. These are cases that have already been disposed of, not solved, not settled, disposed of, thrown in the trash. But it's more. If you go to MSNBC all day long, you had Democrats, liberals, people on their network decrying the fact that these crimes are going to be investigated. Why? What's the problem?
Now we are learning, this is a headline from yesterday about your institution, the FBI. FBI Deputy Director says the Bureau will pour resources into cases including Supreme Court leak and cocaine at the White House. Frank Bugluzzi, the fact that this is their priority, what does that tell you? And what is the cost of the FBI asking to spend its resources on cocaine at the White House, on the Supreme Court leak? What is going to be lost in that redirection?
So at face value, of course, people catching this quickly in the evening news with their lives going on around them, they may say, what's wrong with that? We all want this solved. Let's get to it. Let's figure out whose cocaine it was at the White House. Let's solve the pipe bombs placed on the night of January 5th. Let's figure out who leaked the Dobbs draft from the Supreme Court. Sure, but you've got to understand, as you said, first, what's not getting done in the FBI's national security priorities: public corruption, organized crime, violent gangs, number one. Number two, what's really behind all of this posturing by the deputy director of the FBI? He's got to make good on the promises that Kash Patel, the director, and himself made in their podcasts, their books, their public appearances, where they said, I believe in the following conspiracies. I believe the FBI is hiding who the pipe bomber is. I believe that some liberal Democrat leaked the Dobbs draft out of the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. And now, last week, Ken Delanian of NBC News reported on the pressure coming from MAGA on the FBI. Hey, you said you'd deliver on this. Show us the goods. Show us, expose all of these conspiracy theories you espoused. Well, they can't do it. And so now we're seeing all these resources are going to go into doing something. By the way, the Supreme Court leak was never truly investigated. So look, I'm for a real honest investigation. You'll recall the Chief Justice decided he'd do that in-house with the Marshal of the Supreme Court. That's not an investigation. They didn't. I wrote about this. I've spoken about it. They never went outside the court to interview former clerks, spouses, never did a real live grand jury to get to the bottom of this. So yeah, let's do it. But are they prepared? Be careful what you ask for. Because if the FBI finds that, gee, it wasn't some left-wing liberal who leaked the Dobbs decision, are we going to get that truth? That's what's important.
Wow. Thank you to Newsbusters for the clip. So MSNBC does not want these things investigated. Shocking. And this guy, who's supposedly the expert here, I love that they're all suddenly worried about resources. Oh, well, that's way too much money for the federal government to spend. But finally, Democrats are finding things that they don't want to spend federal dollars on, your tax dollars. No, it's more important that we spend it on DEI programs and drag shows at the Air Force and things like that. And then now he's floating this idea. It's like, oh, well, but if the investigation discovers that it was a conservative who leaked the Dobbs report, are we really ever going to learn the truth? So hold on here, pal. Are you telling me that the FBI might not release the truth if it's politically damaging to the White House? Is this a new phenomenon for the FBI, or is this something they've always done? Is it just Trump's FBI that would do that? It's just Kash, Patel, and Dan Bongino? But up until now, the FBI, they just call balls and strikes, no politics at all. He sort of just gave away the store, didn't he? It's shocking to me that MSNBC and liberal Democrats don't want these stories investigated. It's almost like they know what the outcome's going to be, and they just don't want you to learn about it.